what keeps you up at night in terms of the real challenges underneath that we're going to need to tackle in order to address it?
No, I'll think about the investment, but actually before I go to the investment, but it's difficult. There are many different paths we could go to, but that's something we hadn't done before. We do now.
Has become really familiar with is levelizing because of the battery. And so this past summer, we were seeing $150 a megawatt hour of cost instead of $1,000 spiking. So that's huge in terms of the impacts on all of our customers across the West, the entire West. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we think ahead here?
To the afternoon session on the second day of a rainy, dreary day out there, but it's bright and illuminating in here. So I'm going to turn the panel right over to our dual moderators, and I'm not sure who's going to tell us about the panel.
I'm going to start.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you.
Great. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I was joking. I should have made everyone do jumping jacks since it's after lunch and we're the last panel of this session. So I'm hoping we can keep you awake. So just to give a brief intro of this panel and to set this up, I was reading an article my friend Hector sent me the other day about the growth of data centers in the US and how this load growth is just happening, in real time here. And the statistic that was in that article said that US data centers are expected to drive 128 gigawatts of demand by 2029. So if you think about that number, that's about almost 16% growth. And for those of you who have been in this industry like myself for quite a long time, you know that we have not seen that type of growth in quite some time. I think if you look back, it was probably the 80s, and even then it wasn't at that pace. So not just growth driven by data centers, but by electrification and all of the other things that are happening that are making this a really exciting but challenging time for all of us. So I thought what we could do is start with some intros, and then we'll dive into some questions. So David, you want to kick us off?
So, thank you. David Smith, I'm VP for Commercial and Contract Control at National Grid in our New England business. And you'll guess by the accent, 8 years ago, I moved across the US.
Great. Good afternoon. Larry Bekkedahl, Portland General Electric, Senior Vice President for our Advanced Energy Delivery, and just loved causing trouble. So glad to be here.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Nidhi Santen. I'm a research scientist at EPRI, and I lead two things at EPRI. I lead our long-term IRP and utility resource planning research program, and I also lead our modeling and analytics team that does our integrated energy systems planning. So I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon. I'm super thrilled to talk to all of you because the last session of the day means we are talking to all the people who care so much that they stayed for this afternoon. So this will be the pinnacle of the event, I'm sure.
So Nidhi, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. You were mentioning some interesting things that you're doing at EPRI in this area, and I thought maybe you could share a little bit about that before we dive in.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So EPRI has been thinking about data centers now for some time. We work with utilities across the country. Larry's been involved with many of these discussions as well as David in other areas. But data centers and sort of meeting the challenges of growth is going to come with a very tall order. And one of the things that EPRI is starting to do is think about developing the capabilities and tool sets to really push out to industry so that utilities can actually do a lot of this planning and operations development themselves. We're launching a new initiative called Grid Impact, which essentially covers 3 areas. And I think it's going to come up in our conversation today, but it's certainly come up over the last 2 days. Developing the tools and capabilities to really enable this shift that we've been talking about is going to take making sure that energy delivery can happen at an unprecedented scale. And that's going to mean making sure that we can utilize the infrastructure we have today and make sure that we can plan the network in a way that is conducive to all of the change that we've been talking about. The second is integrated energy systems planning. And this is really about making sure that there is horizontal and vertical integration across generation, transmission, distribution, end-use load, grid edge, as well as making sure that we are capturing the temporal dynamics at play across these different subsystems well into the planning domain as well, and so covering everything from even looking into the future. And then the third area is making sure that operations are happening in a resilient and flexible way. So this is really about equipping control room operators with what the tools and the methods that they need in order to operate the grid in a flexible way. So I think all three of these, again, are going to be the foundation of meeting the challenges of growth, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about David and Larry's experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So David, I'm going to start with you. We've talked about the obvious data centers. That's a big challenge. I know in your service territory is how you're going to meet the demand to support that. But what are some of the other drivers that you're seeing in your area that are really driving this energy demand?
Yeah, so I think if we look back a few years ago, we would have said the thing that's going to drive the capacity increase on the network would have been EV and heat.
EVs,
and
yep.
then demand centers come in and
electrification.
it just changes the dynamic significantly. I was actually looking at our numbers, and in terms of what's driving our investment, and this is over the next 5 to 10 years, top still is asset health, which is about 50% is still asset health. But that number's shrunk significantly if you look back the last 10 years. And interesting that number itself changes different between distribution and transmission. So transmission more, we've got significant assets that are in asset need on the transmission system, albeit as we replace them, there's the opportunity to fundamentally change the capacity ratings, et cetera, as we go through it. And then the other 50% really comes from customer. The 25% is from that customer direct, things like DG and the infrastructure and data centers. We've got the ability now to do, for the first time, anticipatory investment, which links into the wider investment growth that you'll see from EV and heat, and then the other 20% comes from there. So there's a wide range in driver investment. The other thing I'd say is that the amount of investment we go from, and this is just in the New England, which covers Massachusetts distribution and some transmission across Vermont and New Hampshire, we go from $1 billion of investment this year to $3 billion in about 5 years' time. It is so significant, the ramp in investment.
Yeah, that's that growth that we're seeing across the board. Larry, what about you?
Well, you've hit on a couple of areas. One, and I'd love to how you said, Melanie, many years we were at 1% or less growth. EVs came along, electrification, and we went to 3 to 4%. That's what we were forecasting about 3 years ago. And then data centers came along, and chip manufacturing came along, domesticizing of both. And actually, as it's been mentioned numerous times, from a national security perspective, it's really important that we move on and stay ahead of this. So for us, as I think about that, coming about, but we've got a target of 100% by 2040. We also have technologies that are coming at us, and how do we use and put that into use as utilities? And then we still have lots of policy people that want to help us as well. And so making sure a system is reliable, commercially it fits together, and now we have policies that are coming at us as well. So it's really, I want to say, an exciting time. We've never seen it like this before in the history, at least my career. And the way I equate it to is going back to the origins for the Northwest. When the New Deal came along, wanted to put people to work, build the dams. And so that's what happened in the 30s. World War II broke out in the 40s. The aluminum industry exploded, and we were bringing large loads in. That's when the transmission was built. And so by the 70s, we had the transmission that we live with today in the Northwest. And so now, aluminum industry left in the 90s. Chip manufacturers came in, filled the space, and now we have data centers. And for us, data centers mean fiber optics come from Southeast Asia, land in our area in Hillsboro. And so what do data centers need? They need fiber, they need power. That's what they're driving for. And so on a 4.5 gigawatt system, we we have over 3 gigawatts of requests right now. So that's the kind of thing that, is moving us, and to say, how do we do this differently?
Yeah, I was surprised learning over the last couple of days that Portland is a hub